Hello, and welcome to the first video for Chapter 1. You might notice that if you are looking over the chapter that the content's a little bit out of order. I've decided to reorganize it, I think it makes it flow a little bit better. You'll also notice as we go through some of the chapters that I've put some of them a little bit out of order, again, just to get some important information up front in the beginning of the semester to you guys. So in this first part of the module, we're going to talk about the steps in the research process. And basically, this is what we're going to be covering the entire semester, is the research process. That's what this class is about. So here are all the steps. They're listed in the textbook, and it might seem like a lot, but we're going to break it down for you. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each one in some more detail in this video. So the first two steps are find a research idea and form a hypothesis. That's basically what we do the first half of the semester. You're forming a research idea, you're selecting a topic, searching the literature to find an unanswered question, and then by the end of that literature review, you'll be able to form a hypothesis. While we're doing that, we're going to be learning how to do the next steps in the research process, steps 3 through 6. We'll learn how to define and measure our variables, who the participants are, how we select them, ethical treatments for them. We'll select a research strategy, so you understand the difference between research strategies and research designs. You'll select a research design. So we'll learn all about that as we're completing those first two steps. And then you'll take what we learn in this first half of the semester, and you'll actually conduct the study, evaluate the data, report the results, and refine or formulate your research idea. So steps 7 through 10 is basically what we spend the second half of the semester doing. So the first step is finding a research idea. And you may already have an idea in your head, and that's great. What we need to make possible is that idea is something that's feasible in this class. So we have an online class. You are going to design an experiment and carry it out. We will do that via Google Forms. And so we are a little bit limited in what we can and can't do. So the first thing you need to do is select a topic. And we'll go over this in later on in the module of how you actually find this research idea, different ways you can select a topic. If you have no idea where to start, hopefully some activities we'll do a little bit later on this week and beginning of next week will help you be able to select a topic. And then you'll search the literature for an unanswered question. So if you have a topic that you know and you already have a research question, great. If you don't, you can look through the literature and you can see if there's some sort of unanswered question. And we'll talk again more next week about how to do that. And then after you have that, you'll form a hypothesis. So we'll also talk in this first few weeks about how to form a hypothesis, what makes a good hypothesis. And we'll talk a lot about these words, testable and falsifiable. So the idea is that a hypothesis needs to be something that's tested. Sometimes researchers put forth a hypothesis that is not able to be tested or proven false. And that's what this idea of falsifiability means. In order for it to be truly scientific, that hypothesis needs to be able to be tested and proven false. And we'll talk a lot more about what that means as well in the next week or so. So the next step is determining what your variables are. How will you define those variables? How will you measure those variables? We'll talk about operational definitions. We'll have a lab that goes over what operational definitions are, some activities for that. And basically just to give you kind of a preview, is an operational definition is a detailed description of a variable that allows other researchers to replicate your study. And it's important to be able to operationally define your variables, and you'll see that that's an important part of your experiment in order to have your experiment run effectively and for others to be able to replicate that experiment. And so that's part of Chapter 3. The next step is identifying the participants or subjects for the study, how they'll be selected, planning for their ethical treatment. Now, being a class on a college campus, we're at the whim of volunteers. So the type of sample we'll have to use is called a convenient sample, and you'll learn about that more in Chapter 4. However, it's important to also understand that there's other ways and better ways to select your samples, and so we'll talk about those methods when we get to Chapter 4. One thing that you'll need to use in your experiment, not necessarily for selecting your subjects, but for placing them in their groups, is this random list generator. And just to show you how that works, So one thing that sometimes scientists use to select their participants is a random list generator, or to randomly select them. And we'll talk more about that when we get into actually selecting our subjects in chapter 4. We'll also talk more about ethics and things like that. And so the Nuremberg Code will be something that's important there. So again, I pushed back chapter 4 and pushed ahead selecting a research strategy because I think it's important in the first part of the semester to understand what research strategies are. And your textbook does a good job at trying to differentiate between research strategies and research designs. I am going to simplify that for you a little bit, but I think it's important to understand that distinction. So the research strategy is determined by the type of question that you ask, and also ethical considerations. Now, we're going to talk about non-experimental versus experimental research strategies, and that's getting into chapters 6 and 7. And just it's important to note that the type of research strategy that you're going to employ is the experimental research strategy. And so when we get to those chapters, it's important to understand that distinction because you'll have to actually manipulate a variable, and that's where it becomes experimental research. And then the next step is to select a research design. So after you've decided if you're going to do experimental or non-experimental research, you then select a research design. And here we're getting into chapters 7 through 11, really, in terms of selecting a research design. We'll learn about a between subjects design and a within subjects design. Again, when we get into chapters 8 and 9, really, is where we talk about research design. And it's important, we'll learn the difference between a research design and, again, a research strategy. And then you conduct the study. So again, we're going to be learning about all those things that we just talked about that first half of the semester while you write your literature review. And then we come back and we start to conduct the study where you have to plan it out. So you have to understand the differences between research strategies, research designs, how to operationally define your variables, what's ethical treatment of your subjects, how you select your subjects, how you assign your subjects to groups. All that's very important. So it's not just important for the first exam, it's also important for you to be successful in that big research project that's the culmination of this class. And then towards the very end of this semester, you'll evaluate the data. So you're going to conduct the study, collect data, and then evaluate the data. Then you're going to report the results. You're going to use SPSS to analyze the results, and then you're going to present that to me in your final research paper. And then most of the time, what people come back and do is they refine or they reformulate their research idea. We'll be at the end of the semester, so we won't necessarily be doing that, but just keeping in mind that that is part of that research process. So you'll see in this first part of the module that there's also these links to how to read a research article and critically reading research articles. I really encourage you to read these up front while classwork is light and you don't have a lot to do, because knowing how to effectively read a research article is going to be key to your success in this class.